want to go back to something that bugged me from 10 minutes ago. We've talked about the fractured nature of our community. How we've got our Madison silo and our Jackson Township silo and our Canton silo, and we talked about the advantages that we might find in trying to figure out how to find the leaders wherever they might be to bridge those divides. In my work at the Chamber, I see a group of different kinds of entities who work really well together, and they are the 17 school districts in Stark County, where city school districts like Canton and Massillon work and appreciate and are appreciated by suburban school districts like Jackson and Lake. Now, there may be some real fundamental economic reasons why the school districts work together. They've got a very strong education service center, and they've got a lot of economic reasons to work together. But there's got to be a reason why the suburbans and the higher income districts have an acceptance and a respect for the urban districts. And I'm wondering from maybe Mike or Adrian whether the local government community or the business community or economic development community can learn something from what the school districts have taught themselves in those areas.
I think it's about the positive experiences that they've had together, the school districts. So they've applied for large federal grants where they've each benefited from the center of the federal grants, because you can't get federal grants unless it is for poverty level. So they've focused on Alliance, Canton, and Massillon, but then grew that out of that area. So there have been 3 National Science Foundation grants that have been very large, that have been given to this county, and then there has been private investment through the SAM Center, which has also been a very large investment, and then that has been, as you asked Mike earlier, it's been carried on by the school districts because they think that it's important. So success has bred that collaboration and that cooperation, and it has been the final success that people can talk about. So we've had an explosion in dual credit enrollment, for example, and that grew very slowly. It was feared at first, but it now has gone from 200 enrollments 500 years ago. 5 years ago. It feels like 500 years. 5 years ago to over 3,000 enrollments now, which is just huge. And what it really says is that there now is an opportunity for almost every student to do something in the post-secondary arena. So success, I think, has bred that. The other thing I think has bred it is we tend to be unusual in terms of what the state, how the state thinks. And so collaboration has allowed us to be unusual and to stand our ground as unusual folks. So I think that has also helped. Success has been as well.
Mike, can you imagine a way that the school district model could improve the overall community cooperation among diverse and quite different kinds of groups in Stark County? I mean, you were a superintendent in Minerva, which is an impoverished community compared to some, and then superintendent in North Canton, which has its challenges, but not nearly as many.
We were very intentional, using Adrian as a concept of flying at 20,000 feet. Individually, school districts would be very intentional about what's our value proposition of being together. It could be purchasing, it could be sharing resources, it could be not duplicating situations that didn't need to be duplicated, whether it be within our county regionally or broadly as a county. So it's very intentional on superintendent's parts to be around that table and say, what can we do thematically that exists all across all 17 school districts? So I use that analogy, Dave, to broaden and maybe pick up on something Adrian asked about earlier. There's first, for me today, the REC project, the REC project. That would be an example of already having something together that's an asset builder for our area. Use that as an example, and perhaps if higher ed has a similar organization, the Chamber yet has another organization, be intentional about putting those folks around the table routinely. So So I'm replicating a model in my discourse this morning to say superintendents did it because economy of scale, as well as being very intentional about what we wanted to do about our culture. We don't need a lot of little entities, and we all agreed upon that. So perhaps on this research data, we could put groups that are already together, let that be our asset builder, and then be intentional about meeting routinely and having action planning around that. So I've just very quickly conceptualized the county model in schools with perhaps a business model that already exists. Steve does a great job with economic development. That should always be a player. Higher ed should always be a player. What's going on in that should then be intentional about meeting routine and coming about with action plans. Whether it's launching an initiative, what we would do on purchasing bus fuel, using a quick analogy, there was an economy of scale in that for us. If we were going to need something in gifted education, we didn't need 18 gifted coordinators. If we could regionalize 3 or 4 districts that were smaller like Minerva to share one, we did. And we found ways to make sure we were paying our share at that time. So I'm going back and forth between the school model and what might present itself as an asset here in our area. I think of Allman Hospital, all care and physicians have put together an integrated model that helps them work extremely well with ebb and flow of the business, whether it's insurance or care, or that primary person who the person sees at the doctor's office. They've modeled that in such a way to make it efficient. So I'm comparing school to our vertically integrated model of Altman Alt Care and Physicians with what might be integrated here in our community with assets that we already have. So my suggestion would be take the data and let's see what we already have and get those players to the table quickly and then look at concentric circle expansion after that. But keep it moving, intentional, and using little analogies that we've heard about this morning. There's a long-winded answer from a short guy. He says that might be an idea.
It hasn't been, the model that works in Stark County hasn't been translated into the other counties, even in education. And part of the reason for that is that here in Stark County, there hasn't been a for sale sign on the services that are provided through the educational service center. But there is a for sale sign if you go over in Mahoney County, which I happen now to know about, or if you go to Cuyahoga County, where the for sale sign is up selling the services to the local school districts. And that difference, I think, is what's transferable. So instead of having a for sale sign that says, so how much do you have to pay Cuyahoga County, or how much do you have to pay Mahoney County for school services? Here is, how can we get those school services together and then everybody works together? If you could translate that not only to school districts, but also to the county government, I think we would have a very different option. When I said we think differently in Stark County and the educational thing, that's what I was talking about. And we don't do it the same way the state does it. And we don't think the same way the state does.
Good point. If I might use a funny little twist, we talk about thinking outside the box, and my notion is expand the box. You don't have to be outside, just expand what you have and keep thinking that way. And that was where I was picking up on your notion to be in the for sale sign versus just expand what you have and be intentional about that.
How do we translate that into other areas? How do we translate that into local government? How do we find bridges so that Canton works with Canal Fulton, works with Massillon, works with Alliance, works with Minerva? Are they so much different from school districts that the example is not applicable?
You want me to
Sure.
comment on this one? One of the first things I wanted to do when I became mayor, it's been 5.5 years, 6 years mayor, and we came with a platform and I evaluated what was there when I got there. And I looked at the operations and trying to come from a business background. I thought, we need to streamline some of the stuff to be more efficient, more effective. Our parks department wasn't very effective. Our recreation department wasn't very effective. The rest of the world had a parks and recreation department as one. We had two separate. And to try to keep the story short, I made a proposal to merge parks and recreation. Now, keep in mind, as the mayor of the city in our structure, we have a separate park board and a park director that reports to that board, not to me. We have a separate recreation department and a separate rec board and a separate director that report to their board and not to us. We do fund the parks, but not the recreation. It gets kind of confusing. This is multiple layers of just the city, Canton's government. When I made the proposal, the park said, oh, we don't like that idea. The recreation said, we don't think we'll save money. Newspapers came out and said, oh, that's not a very good idea. You know, nobody should use departments. And so we then started working behind the scenes, trying to get everybody towards the same page and be more uniform. And I just asked, look, can we at least create one website that you guys would share so that the public doesn't know that it's two different organizations? But if they want to rent a pavilion in our parks, it goes to the park department. If they want to rent the volleyball net next to the pavilion in the park, we got to call the recreation department. So let's have one website, they can click it, and then internally we can handle it based on departments, but the people will have better service. I couldn't even get them to do that. So years gone by, meetings have gone by, and we finally put together, I finally threatened to disband the park board and got them to the table to actually start seriously talking. And as of last fall, we got the parks department, the rec department, the school board, the community organizations, all the groups in Parks and Recreation to agree that we would move toward moving these two entities into one Parks and Recreation for the city to service our population and those needs better. However, in order to get that agreement, we agreed to put it on the ballot this November for a parks levy that will start the process. If the voters vote to allow us to move forward with this process in November, then 3 years from now, when the current rec levy expires, we'll come back with a renewal levy that will formally merge Parks and Recreation. If on a second vote of the people 3 years from now, that'll go into effect the following January. That'll be 10 years. 10 years, if everything goes smoothly right now, with the vote in November and then coming back 3 years from now with the second vote, and then that following January, it'd be 10 years from now, walked in and said, guys, we need to bring these departments together because it makes sense financially, economically, the responsibilities. 10 years to merge two city departments in the city of Canton. I'm not talking about other governments. This is just city of Canton. In that same 10-year time period, the city of Shanghai nearly doubled in size and had 10 million people. And I can't merge two city departments together within 10 years. And you're asking us how we can get a neighboring community or another city with a different legislative body, a different township organization, whatever, to figure out how to work together. It is unbelievably challenging for government to function the way it is structured. The only way we're going to solve this problem is if we restructure government. We need a countywide government, eliminate the townships, the cities, the villages, the county, and have one, like Columbus did. They basically managed the whole thing. They got one community, and then they can make decisions for a region because you got one group of people you're dealing with. Until you figure that out, you're not going to get this thing working. It's unbelievably difficult.
That's going to be the headline repository.